there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this well-illuminated classic wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing it up for some pretty ambitious cruising. If that's the sort of thing that you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. And yes, this is an auspicious evening here in Victoria. The harbour does an evening, as I mentioned, called Light Up, where all the boats in the harbour are well lit up, and my goodness, it's been a lot of fun. Hello to IDC, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
Not just 15 minutes ago, there were hundreds of people on the dock, and now it's settled all out. Anyway, in this episode, we are finishing up Zephyrus. We finally, I know, it's kind of hard to figure out what we're actually talking about. History. Jump back in time. Well, it's all done. Hope you enjoy. And well, good morning. Well, today we are back to cold and rain, so we have the curtain closed in, which keeps it maybe slightly warmer in here. Okay, let's carry on with this. I have to say this went way better than I thought it might have. Climb to the porthole. Excellent. And here we go. Splendid. Okay then, reefing out these decks has turned out to be quite a challenge, and that has to do with the way they were made. They're not that old, I don't know, a decade or 15 years or so, which for a teak deck shouldn't be very old. I believe this is the first time they've ever been reefed out to be recaulked. Now, these decks were apparently vacuum bag installed. In other words, instead of any screws and bungs, because you can see there are no bungs, the whole thing was laid out and then a vacuum bag installed to pull it down against the deck, where epoxy would bond it to the deck. And well, that's probably what happened, but they also, because they used the system of doing a shiplap joint. In other words, instead of leaving a gap between the individual planks, this piece of wood only has a rabbet cut out of it, and the bottom of the seam here is actually also this piece of wood, so that the actual seam, the gap between them, is a little hairline right at this point between this one and this one. Well, that's fine. That automatically gives you your spacing. But it also means that the seam is very, very shallow. And in fact, in this case, very, very shallow. So I've had a problem that with some wear on the decks over the years. In some places, not here, but in some places, this is as shallow as 1/8 of an inch, which certainly isn't deep enough for a new joint. So I looked at all kinds of different solutions to solve that problem. I looked at chisels, I looked at maybe little hand sliding router blades, or I didn't know what I was going to do. Turned out just keeping the reefing tool from Teak Deck Systems really, really sharp, I'm actually able, can you see that? To plane off the bottom of this seam quite effectively, as long as I'm very careful not to jump out or cause any other kind of grief. Now, there's 2 or 3 problems with that. One is, there's nails. The person who put this deck down, yes, may have vacuum bagged it, but they also nailed it in the bottom of the seam joint, which, of course, now I have nail heads to hit, so I had to go around with a nail set and sink them all down. On top of that, a lot of epoxy squirted up through the joints when they vacuum bagged or however they installed it all. And that epoxy was actually sitting against the side of the joint in lots of places, and may have been one of the reasons that this deck started to leak prematurely, because it kept the sealant from sticking to the side of the wood very well. And that epoxy is very hard. So every time I hit it, well, that's not it, but there we go. You can see a change of sound there. Well, I'm actually cutting into epoxy now, and I have to be very careful because it wants to climb out the seam. And of course, this tool on this soft teak would make a terrible mess. And I have made 2 so far. I have a feeling they'll probably sand out. Okay, so anyway, it's just a lot of work. I'm almost at the home stretch with this, happily, and then I can sand the bottom out fairly well, and we can move on to putting some new sealant in. All right, let's carry on. You can always tell when you hit the epoxy because it goes white. So I'm sanding out all the seams to get the last of the epoxy out and make sure I have no last little residual bits of the old sealant. Bit of a job. So what I do is I just wrap sandpaper discs around this this spreader and work it hard on one side. And then on the other side. And then when I use up that section, I just roll it around a few degrees and I have nice fresh sandpaper. All right, reefed, sanded, checked, cleaned, vacuumed. They're as good as they're gonna get. Time to tape the planks, both sides of the seam, so that when I pump the new sealant in there, we don't have a huge amount of excess sanding to do on the decks, because these decks do not want to be sanded any more than is absolutely necessary because we're running out of teak. As a result, when I sand these, they may not go to beautiful, bright new teak, because of course they're gonna go silver gray again in short order. That's what we want. All I'm really going to do is tidy them up and make sure that I get the seams sanded flush, and then that's all I'm going to sand these decks. All right, so this, I've never done this before. It's just a heck of a lot of taping. Okay, well, it's now or never. The sealant, the caulking for these decks comes in a sausage. Never even seen one of these before. You need a special gun for it. I've never loaded it. I've never figured out how. However, I have watched a video that will tell me something about it. Before I start pumping this caulking into these seams, there's one thing I have to talk about, and that's bond breaking. I've talked about this before. When you have a 3-sided seam that you are going to put sealant in, generally you want to put a tape in the bottom of the seam to resist the sealant sticking to all 3 sides, which means when the outside move like this, the sealant will just sort of stretch between the two. How's my illustration? I don't know. And that greatly improves the chances of the seam not failing. However, and to be fair, the previous person who put this deck together did use bond breaking tape in the bottom. The only problem is these seams are very, very shallow, and bond breaking tape becomes less and less effective at that point, because if you have no adhesion in the bottom of the seam, you only have a fairly small amount, as small as 1/8 to 3/16 on the sides, and I think that is more likely to cause trouble. And especially in this case where the bottom of the seam is a mess of voids. It splits, there's chunks of there's nail holes all the way through. I think it's more important to fill the seam completely so that if they do fail at the sides, at least you have a chance of keeping water out of the decks by having the bottom of the seam and all those voids filled as well. I may be completely wrong on this, and by the time you see this, it's going to be done. Okay, I gave you a quick glimpse of this before. This is Teak Deck Systems SIS 440. Never used this stuff before. This is apparently the product for this application. However, as I mentioned, it comes in a sausage rather than a regular caulking tube, and you need this special gun. Also, apparently there's quite a trick to opening it so that it will not bleed back into the gun, and I think I've researched that enough as well. So before we get to that, there's the tip. Like every caulking tip, you need to cut it at whatever magic angle is going to work for what you're doing. Part of what's really important about this is making sure that the tip is cut on an angle, which generally I don't do, but I'm going to do this time because I've been told to, and to squeeze it so that you can get the nozzle down into the seams to really pump that sealant down inside. That should be enough width. So here we go. We'll squeeze that up a little bit like that. That indeed will run in the seam. Sausage in the gun. The trick is the sausage material, the foil, is bunched together with a metal clip. Some people say just put an incision in here and it will leak out, but the problem is the remaining of the clip kind of gets balled up into the tip of here and can cause back pressure to flow back around. So apparently the hot tip is to remove it with an end cutter like this. So this may take both hands. Reach around and off. I think that's probably a very, very good tip. Okay. Tip on and the collar. Okay. See if we can get some sealant to start to come out here. Yep, flowing quite nicely. I did keep the sealant aboard the boat overnight so it wasn't too cold. All right, let's go make a mess. To be fair, you're not going to join me for the first few feet of caulking the seams because it's in a really awkward place up inside the front of the combing there. I'm going to wait till I can come back into the light so you can actually see what's going on. So by the time you see me next, I'll have already done 20 feet of 4 seams and I'll either be in a great mood or not. Okay, now if any of that was stressful and messy, removing the tape has to be the mother of all messy things, especially in confined quarters like this. So I'm very fortunate to have Lady Zephyrus, who has been helping me actually all through this. Give me a hand with the pulling the tape, because if anything about pulling tape, one person sort of pulls it and the other person collects it in a sticky, gooey mess.
Oh boy.
Oh!
Fresh set of rods to do the rest of it.
And we're off, side 2. This first bit is so easy till you run into trouble. Well, I don't mind saying that went a lot better than I thought it might have. We'll see what the sanding looks like in a couple of days. All right. Well, all right then. Well, we were down in Victoria for a couple of days waiting for this stuff to cure, and I think it's probably just fine now. And I can put the sander to it and we can see how this is really going to turn out. Okay, we'll start by razoring off any of these massive nubs that there's no sense sanding. There you go. Well, I can say it is certainly very stressful, but my gosh, it's going to be beautiful. I can see I'm not quite down enough here. You know, it is terrifying to be cutting that teak down at all, but it's really not much. I can't even really feel how much I'm taking it down, and I'm not determined to get it beautiful golden teak. As long as I have the seams the correct size, I'm going to stop, because the whole thing is going to go gray again shortly anyway. Other than it being terrifying, it's going great. All right then, we're moving so fast now with all the last little things to get done to get Zephyrus home to her slip in Victoria. Next step is to go inside and take this piece of stock and put those two risers, those two vertical extra posts on top to hide the pocket screws, as well as some other blocks we're going to make in there. It's going to be kind of fun. So I'm just going to put a little round over on these, and we can cut them to fit. Now, a few minutes ago, before I even remembered that you guys were here, I did prepare the very first of the cabin overhead little strips, which is simply a 1/4 inch strip of mahogany that is going to hide the seams in that white masonite on the cabin top. And I need to get at least the aftmost one in, because this piece sits against it. So I've just cut this, trimmed it to fit, got some oil on it, and let's go install it. Splendid. Now, doesn't that look nice? In time, I'm going to replace all these screws with nice bronze oval head. But in the meantime, that'll hold. Okay, so if you've been following along, and I'm sure you have, you know I have to hide this wire with some kind of a block here. And well, you may know, well, I'm going to knock that off in a second. There's another wire in there for the navigation light that's out here. And I have to hide that wire, even though it's already hidden. But this is missing on the other side. And I have to hide the kind of a little gloppy mess that's in here in the corner. And anyway, this needs a bit of attention in here. Originally, I was going to make a big block that came down here that potentially would put a light on later. But we've reconsidered that, and I'm going to combine this block right to the corner, and with the potential of putting a light this way, which I think is nicer. And then that way more of this not original, but recently rebuilt mahogany is seen. However, on this side, I do have to make a small little block to hide these wires here. So, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. What we really need to deal with is right here, which is this section to cover these pocket screws. And here we go, after a few test fits. Beauty. Nice and snug. Love it. We're really tag teaming today. You can see Lady Zephyrus outside varnishing. There we go. Now, when I put bungs in interior, I don't use any glue at all. I rely on the friction fit of these tapered bungs, as well as the stickiness of the oil and varnish that's going to be on here. I will, however, instead of chiseling inside, I will use my one-sided saw to trim these off. Quite eager not to scratch that overhead thing there. Excellent. Start with some rough and finish off with some fine. And a little oil. Taking advantage of its tack rag qualities to rub off any offending dust. So I'll have to cut 3 dados out of this. One for the existing wire for the side marker light, one for a future wire for a light out here, and one to clear the junk in the back corner there. So I'll just set this up here and bring the fence up. And well, we're done. I can't imagine what you've just had to watch, how I was able to string together the various clips I've shot in the last couple of days. It's late. We're going to steam home to Victoria at the crack of dawn tomorrow morning, and we've just finished. Lady Zephyrs has just finished the last varnish on several things. We've recaulked all the windows. We've got all the hardware back on. We've finished up the decks. Recaulked this seam in here. Of course, the bulkhead is looking great, and it's got 3 coats of varnish on it. We have to keep heaters on them to be able to stay ahead of getting the coats on over the last couple of days. The deck turned out really well. I'm very happy with it. Hopefully it will last sometime into the future. We did so many other little things that didn't even talk to you about. All kinds of other little repairs here and there, and it's been a bit of a marathon, but I'm so glad we've done it because Zephyrus is looking so good, and we've got some major hurdles out of the way. Even this thing, which I thought was going to give me so much trouble, turned out just fine. I gotta remember, be careful where I can put my hand here. And the bulkhead itself, I'm just so pleased with. I'll take you inside in a minute. Well then, Zephyrus is sort of back to normal in here. Lady Zephyrus has started to put some stuff back up in here, but I'm really just loving the way it looks. It's been up long enough that I'm sort of used to it already, but the first couple of days, it was just so glorious to have that view. The little wire cover and the other cover turned out really well. Waiting to find some nice little lamps of some sort to put on that side block, but on the whole, I'm very pleased. We'll get some more finish on this in the next little while, but I find that it just fits the boat, and I think it could have been like this from new.
Here it is.
Here it is.
November what? Sometime in the middle of
November. It took a little while, but we're done. Look at that fabulous bulkhead, and we are about to start the engine and slip our lines. Well, to be fair, we've already slipped the lines. One thing about being in a shed, you can just sort of sit here for a bit.
We need to find a boat show to go to.
We do. Boat's looking so good. We have to do a cook. Well, cheers and congratulations. The boat is looking fantastic.
Congratulations to all your hard work.
Well, thank you very much. And cheers. Yours.
Yes.
Cheers. Okay, are we off?
We are.
Let's park up this beautiful old Perkins. Always starts first crank. Love this thing. Push off of this side because the current is holding us against this side of the boathouse. And off we go. so wonderful to be able to see out that window just like I'm backing up a car. It's just fantastic. Well, hello and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week, coming to you this week from MV Geordie in beautiful downtown Victoria. Okay, we're going to Neighborhood Brewery from the Okanagan Valley here in British Columbia for their Happy Place Juicy Pale Ale. I've never even heard of this brewery before, so I'm quite excited to see what I think of this. Oh, well, finally done. Finally done. And Zephyrus is back here in the marina in Victoria looking absolutely splendid. Very pleased with the way that went, and so is Lady Zephyrus, I can tell you. On to bigger, well, actually smaller things. This is quite a pour. There may be a slight time delay between right now and right now. Not that that's a perfect improvement. Anyway, let's see. Did manage to get down to the beer. That's very tasty, and you know how I love hazies. Okay, we have a lot to get into, so let's jump right into it. Last week's winner of a Travels with Geordie t-shirt is Jennifer White Wolf. Get a hold of me, Jennifer. Congratulations, and we'll make sure you get your t-shirt. All right, love to thank several new patrons that have come aboard in the last little while. I'm a little bit behind with these because we've had guests aboard. So Richard Peacock, thank you very much. John McMonigal, the Bard of the Boats, thank you ever so much, John. And Simon Farrow, thank you all for coming aboard on Patreon. I'm so very, very grateful. Also, new supporters through PayPal. Mark Haynes, Sebastian Frey, and the one more. Thank you all ever so much. Okay, plus gifts, and the thanks for these is long overdue because some of these, well, actually got sidetracked. The Abernet sanding disc, so grateful for these. These are the absolute cream of the crop of sanding discs because they are almost dustless when used with a good vacuum system. So happy. These, as well as the stainless steel thimbles for the continued work for the upstairs helm for the steering for Geordie, both came from Bob M. Thank you very much, Bob. Very, very grateful for those. Again, I think lost at the post office was this beautiful little dimmer, lighting dimmer. These are a fantastic little lighting dimmer. If you're looking for a small lighting dimmer, I have to say, of all the ones I've seen, these are brilliant. I'll put a link down below, actually, because they're that good. This, unfortunately, came without any indication of who sent it, so thank you very much to you who did, and if you let me know who you are, I'll thank you properly. And lastly, and this was an unsolicited gift, in fact, this wasn't on any gift list, a compass. I think I have probably proclaimed that I don't have a compass for too long. And well, Patrick Horta decided, well, for gosh sake, Peter, we're gonna have to get you one if you're not gonna get yourself one. This is a beautiful billet machined, very large 12-inch compass, divider and compass. I absolutely adore it. So now I can draw circles properly and also do scribing with it and stuff. Anyway, thank you so much, Patrick. I'm really grateful for that. That's a really nice surprise gift. All right then, all you need now is a word of the week, and I haven't even thought of it until this very moment. So this week's Travels with Geordie word of the week is going to be surprise, because this was a surprise. I'm sure you can do something with it. Cheers, see you next week. Craziness turns into an event.
Yeah. Every day I have on my
Well, I'll just go.